Uh, Thank you so much, everyone. Good morning. Ohayo gozaimasu. I hope everyone is doing well at this point in time during the COVID situation in Japan. And I understand a lot of you might not have been mandated to work from home, but for those who are, I hope you're doing well at home. So this morning, we're going to talk about how to navigate the new cybersecurity challenges, especially in the context of the COVID situation. And to start us off, I guess a lot of you, if not all of you, will be aware that the world has changed, and we're not going back to the way we were before. For example, working in the offices, chances are coming out of this COVID situation, a lot of organizations would have realized that they would achieve similar productivity and efficiency, right, without the need of being in the office, and thereby saving costs of real estate. For example, renting office space, having big numbers of people in the office together at the same time, and leveraging off technology, just like what you are doing right now with Zoom. We are achieving the same effect of you learning from BitSight and BitSight sharing with you without the need of long distance travel. And so the real objective as a key takeaway from today's session, you should really look at how you can leverage off of technology to help you work against inefficiencies, against friction that have been introduced due to the COVID situation. So to start us off first, as a lot of you would have been aware, there are new directions for big organizations to work from home. So we have Twitter, we have Square, announcing the work from home as a forever option. So people don't have to go back to office unless they want to or unless they really need to. Even big organizations out of Japan, like Fujitsu, are announcing a permanent work from home plan. So while you're considering the new challenges that are being introduced by COVID, a lot of us are thinking of COVID in terms of as a temporary situation. And once COVID is over, we'll be going back to our normal lives again. Chances are that will not be happening. And you should be thinking about putting in place strategies that will help you better navigate what is the new norm. So to help us better understand how exactly we got here from the lens of cybersecurity, you probably remember that BitSight COVID first appeared on the world scene sometime in January, February, and organizations started to encourage their workers to work from home sometime in February, March. So as you can realize, one of the studies that BitSight has done right here is that we've realized that up to 85% of the traffic have actually shifted from corporate networks into home networks. For example, for education. So if you have children who are going to school, high schools, universities, you realized that in week 1, when we were in the first week of March at 100%, towards the end of week 4, end of March, only 16% of the traffic was left in the education sector. And as expected for technology in IT, the industry is doing pretty well. You can see at 100% at the beginning of March. We've only shifted about 23%. So the IT industry is fairly resilient, and understanding the limitations and also for probably lessons from SARS and MERS, we've been able to better mitigate the work from home and accessing from residential networks. And you realize generally for business services, at least about 50% or 50+% of the traffic have shifted, right? So first week, and this is the last week, and we're at 58%. So at 42% shifting from corporate network to home networks. Right. So what this has resulted in is it's actually brought forward and increased the number of home-based malware infections. You can see from BitSight, what we're observing right now is 90% of the traffic that we're observing is coming from home residential networks. So what this means for all of you sitting here is that instead of having all of your cyber risk, malware infections, vulnerabilities consolidated at one location from your corporate IP networks, it is now been disseminated to all of your employees who are working from home. And this can be very spread out geographically as well as in the infrastructure sense. So in the more traditional sense, pre-COVID situation, where you have your firewalls, where you have your IPSs, your perimeter defense cybersecurity strategy to protect, right, your employees, it is now not as effective. It is good for protecting your servers, your databases that are within your organization. However, for your employees who are working remotely now, they are actually outside of your organization. So while in the past, you only need to contend with senior management executives as well as salespeople who are traveling constantly, you now have to be aware and apply similar strategies to manage employees who are working from home. So some of the additional observations that we've observed is that, of course, there are increased exposures, right? And this has led to a general increase of 40% in terms of malware attacks in the COVID situation. And of course, you have to now contend with risky user behavior. So in the past, there was a lot of pushbacks for employees to work from home. Primarily, the reason for that is because there are concerns around productivity. There are concerns around being able to measure the productivity as well as efficiency of the employees. But now, because of the COVID situation, we have all been forced into a position where employees have to work from home. So now, from the cyber risk perspective, instead of being concerned with the efficiency and productivity of the employees, you need to be concerned about their cybersecurity risk posture also. So a good example is there's increased COVID-related attacks. There's a lot of phishing attacks, a lot of malware attacks that are masquerading as COVID-19 emails and communications that are getting people to click on links that they normally wouldn't. In the news release article that I will share later, you'll see that COVID-related attacks have actually quadrupled during the month of March. And of course, a lot of these attacks are leveraging off of aged vulnerability exploits. According to a study by Checkpoint, a good 70% of the attacks are actually conducted using pre-2017 vulnerabilities. And the top malicious file right now are Excel files, who contribute to 42% of malicious files attacks. So that is just a trend of what is going on. So as organizations today are leveraging off of a lot of existing technologies, a lot of existing infrastructure to adopt and adapt to the work from home environment, the bad actors are doing the same. They are not using new technology. They are actually using outdated technology, outdated exploits, which are not patched and not defended against by the organizations, and still exploiting those for their monetary gains. So on a high level, you can almost feel that you're being brought back to the past 3 years, 4 years cybersecurity status. Because right now, when your employees are being made to work from home, you realize that as the time goes on, the cyber hygiene, the cyber discipline that they would have had developed in the office will slowly erode away. So while you're in the office, when you're accessing your computers, and then you have your peers sitting around you, and in some organizations, there are posters, they are everywhere, for example, in the toilet. Employees are constantly reminded to be very vigilant against malware, phishing attacks, etc. But in the home environment, this will not be the case. So organizations should be encouraged to continue these kinds of reminders, right? Short of going into the home and putting up posters, but reminders every now and then will be helpful. So as we understand the increased exposures from working from home, we also need to be very mindful that the business would still like to operate as usual, and the business in a lot of cases would still want to grow also. So business will still continue to engage with third parties. You will still continue to outsource, as well as you will still need to continue to assess and monitor your existing vendors. The main concerns today are also with regards to what I would term as operations dynamicity. Now, what this really means is that the landscape of your partners, of your outsourced relationships are going to change. And this change could be due to several reasons. For example, the COVID situation in the different countries. So if you have a manufacturing plant in, say, Thailand or even in China, if they go through a lockdown, you're going to be forced to find alternative manufacturers or leverage more on your backup manufacturer. Also, in consideration of business development, as the market goes on, as we are going into extended COVID situation, where consumer spending affects businesses and some businesses are forced to shut down, your relationships with such businesses will be forced to focus on your secondary partners instead. So as all this uncertainty affects the business landscape, in a lot of organizations that are well positioned and well prepared, they'll be looking to accelerate their growth during this situation, so that eventually when we are in more certain terms around COVID, they are in a very good position to slingshot and accelerate and grow tremendously out of this COVID environment. So you'll be seeing and hearing of organizations that will be performing acquisitions, mergers, even hiring new employees and so on and so forth. So there will be a lot of activities similar to that being conducted. And as you go on, as there's a need and probably a growing need to perform and assess your vendors, there will be frictions pushed back, right? So this creates a disparity between the wants and needs of the business against the backend office. So issues such as inaccessibility and delayed responses when trying to perform vendor assessments, whether be it for the purpose of outsourcing or whether for the purpose of mergers and acquisitions, will introduce a lot of friction. It will slow down your business agility, which is something you want to work around, right? You want to be able to contribute to the agility of the business as a IT support, rather than introduce inefficiencies through the reliance on traditional questionnaires and interviews and audits. And as all of us sitting here are cybersecurity practitioners, you're all very overloaded today, right? It makes your life a lot more tougher. A lot of people under lockdown are staying at home and resting. However, we are all working in cybersecurity, so we don't get a lot of rest. So with a gut punch, as hard as we're all working already, things are only looking to get worse. So as shared earlier on, I mentioned this article from the FBI that reports, cybercrime have actually quadrupled during the COVID pandemic situation. And this was in the early days. This was in 18th April of 2020. And as we go on with COVID testings that are happening, as you're collecting a lot of personal and private information, you can see that even countries, nation states like Indonesia, have had data breach for their COVID-19 test results. So what can we do about it? Throughout the suggestions that I provided in the earlier part of the presentation, I'm going to share 4 main points that we can all work towards and try to adopt. So first step, to closely monitor all of your digital assets. Invest in non-intrusive solutions for quick ROIs. So solutions that are non-intrusive do not introduce any kind of footprint into your organization. So there's red tape to cut through. And solutions that are also non-intrusive are typically subscription-based. So you want to look for subscription-based solutions that allow you to have quick deployments, get quick value out of it, get quick intelligence out of the solution. So if you're thinking against the more traditional cybersecurity strategies, deploying SIEMs, deploying firewalls, deploying endpoint security, all these are very long deployment cycle strategies that will actually stretch out your ROI and prevent you from getting to a secure state much faster than you really should. And as you monitor all your digital assets, a lot of organizations today are actually going through cloud transformation. So you should prioritize and monitor your cloud as well as external digital footprint. So as you continue on in your digital or cloud transformation, you can continue to monitor your migrations. You can continue to monitor for any potential risks that are starting to appear, right? So one thing we're all very aware of will be gaps that are slowly being introduced as you stretch your resources, as you distribute your data and your resources also. So as you go on to monitor, you should also focus on what BitSight calls compromised systems and diligence visibility. So as you can see with, for example, with BitSight, we actually allow you to monitor for infections, right? For any kind of potential exploits also. So in response to the COVID situation and to help our customers gain visibility into what is going on in their employees' environment, BitSight has actually released a feature known as work from home, simply. And understanding, of course, the IPs that your home users will have are typically dynamic. BitSight understands that, and by default, we will provide you with a last 7 days window into what exactly is emanating from those home IPs. So as you saw much earlier on, BitSight is able to observe the kind of C2 or malware communications, and we'll be able to let you know if there are any kind of infections, vulnerabilities that are coming out from your employees' homes. Now, being able to prioritize your assets is also very important based on criticality. So if it is something that your organization has not done before or has not done yet, you can actually leverage off what BitSight has. So BitSight will observe your IP or domain assets and automatically assign priorities in terms of low, medium, as well as high criticalities. And so this will be all the digital assets, at least for your own organization. But I understand a lot of Japanese companies are big MNCs, and you will have a lot of subsidiaries. So when you have subsidiaries overseas, this will be our recommendations for you. Right. So you want to leverage off passive cybersecurity tools for subsidiary observations. Now, by leveraging off cybersecurity tools that are non-intrusive, that do not require on-site installations, you are also avoiding overloading your cybersecurity employees. So now once you're able to monitor your subsidiaries and determine their performance levels, the next thing that you'll want to do is benchmark their performances to identify gaps that are developing either across time or have differences between the performance of your subsidiaries. As you can see, getting visibility of a performance of an organization over time, for example, in this case, from August all the way to current, you get to see if they are starting to develop gaps because the staff is not in the office or simply because the budget is being diverted for other purposes. And what this allows you to do is to prioritize resource allocation, the money, the budget, the time, as well as the effort, where you should be investing at this point in time to make sure as an organization, you are strong, because as the saying goes, the weakest link in the chain is what will cause the chain to break. And now that we've covered your subsidiaries, things that you should be doing for your third parties, your outsourced partners. So as we are all well aware, and we've talked about this earlier on, you from time to time you might have partners that are that might go out of business, that might not be as effective for your business anymore, and you need to consider alternatives. These will be considerations you need to apply then. Most importantly, you need to focus on risk reduction. As if you're familiar with the risk conversation, you will understand that there will never be a zero risk situation. So really what you want to achieve is to reduce the amount of risk that your organization needs to incur or inherit as you're working with third parties. And as you go on, as we did in the last use case where you would benchmark against your third party, you benchmark your subsidiaries, you can also benchmark against peers for contextual decision making. So for example, before you onboard a third party or in the process of throwing a RFP tender, right, you can conduct a benchmark against the shortlisted vendors, right? For example, out of 3, run a report against them using a solution like BitSight, SRS, and from there you can observe in the last 12 months whether the organization has been performing well using a graph similar to this right here. So you will also be able to benchmark against your competitors. So you can subscribe to companies which are your peers and determine how well they're performing and where are your gaps against them. So you will be able to then prioritize the identified gaps and put your resources towards remediating those issues and addressing those strategies. As American saying goes, in order to survive a bear attack, you do not have to be the fastest runner, but you do want to outrun the person next to you. Okay, so moving on to the last part, we're talking about third-party risk management. Now, if you have not or do not have a framework around managing third-party risk, solutions such as BitSight will absolutely help you with building such a framework. So invest in the passive means of monitoring as well as assessment. The solution should be able to tell you your vendor how well they're performing, right? Every day with a changing security rating, as well as inform you how have they been performing in the past couple of months. They should also be able to allow you to tier your vendors based on criticality. So you can see I've got tier 1, 2, and 3 right here. And of course, that should be able to correlate against the risk from the rating and inform you which are your most critical vendors. And of course, use objective data for risk reduction conversations. As you can observe, if you're able to inform the organization about the vulnerabilities that are being observed in their footprint, and if you're able to give them the specific IPs or domains that this is being observed from, that is going to help you better communicate with your third-party vendors. So I've shared the 4 points that you should look into, and I hope today's session has been really useful. So in conclusion, it's essentially what we want to do is to introduce efficiencies, reduce friction through the adoption of technology like BitSight. You want to leverage off the non-intrusive objective tools. Apologies for the typo there. You want to leverage off of peer visibility for the context. And finally, of course, you want to have data-driven conversations where you have evidence, you have facts that can back up your claims and your requests. And with that, we have come to the end of this presentation. I thank all of you very much for your time. Arigatou gozaimasu.